The series begins with a man named Bascom, who we learn is a police detective. We see him listening to a message from his son, telling him his stomach hurts and that's why he doesn't want to go to school. But his father doesn't reply. He returns to his colleague, Detective Misha, and complains about him, saying he uses any excuse to avoid school. At that moment, their superior calls them at work. She informs them that a report has been filed against a criminal named Jimmy. They immediately move out and arrive at the house where Jimmy is arrested. A man named Miller appears, who is Jimmy's father. He is surprised by the police and asks them to get out, telling them he has 2 children and they shouldn't be scared like this. However, they continue their work and reach Jimmy's room. Detective Bascom stands before him and tells him he is arresting him on suspicion of committing murder. Miller is shocked when he hears this and keeps shouting. Bascom threatens to arrest him for obstructing his work. Jimmy is terrified, so much so that he wets himself from fear. Detective Bascom calls Miller to change his trousers. Afterward, when Miller sees a female officer searching through the clothes waiting to be washed, he reprimands her. She tells him she must search thoroughly because there's a chance she might find evidence in the clothes. He leaves her and goes outside to find his wife, Manda, talking with Detective Misha, who is telling her the police will compensate them if they caused any damage to the house. Manda objects to her words, asking how they can arrest a child who is only 13 years old. But the police ignore her question, take him, and leave. Jimmy is agitated the entire way, nervous and crying. They try to calm him down, telling him he can ask for help from his father or mother, but first, he must be registered at the police station. Minutes later, they arrive at the station. Detective Bascom takes Jimmy to the officer responsible for recording details. He starts asking him his name and other information. He offers him the option to have his father or mother represent him during the investigation. He chooses his father, Miller, to represent him because he is still a minor. Then, the officer continues with routine questions about his health and whether he uses drugs or not. When Jimmy answers negatively, the officer informs him that his detention procedures have begun. But seeing him scared and nervous, he reassures him, saying they will provide him breakfast in the cell. Afterward, another officer takes him to his cell until they can photograph him and perform the necessary tests. At the same time, Detective Bascom speaks with Miller and his wife Manda. He tells them that their son, Jimmy, has requested a lawyer. He suggests they use the duty solicitor at the police station, informing them it will be a free service. However, Miller is skeptical about this lawyer since he works with them. Bascom assures him that the lawyer's primary loyalty will be to their son. At this moment, Manda, Miller's wife, confronts Detective Bascom. She tells him he raided the house violently with the police, and now he's pretending to be polite and gentle. Bascom apologizes to her, saying she can file a complaint against him if she wishes, but assures her he was just performing his duties. He then tells Miller that his son chose him to be present during the interrogations and when samples are taken for analysis. Manda gets upset, asking why he chose him and not her, but she shifts her thoughts back to her son, telling Miller that he doesn't like needles. When Miller notices his wife using her phone, he scolds her, but she tells him she's calling their neighbor to check on the house. She tells her daughter, Lisa, that being with them at the police station will be upsetting for her and asks her not to be sad, because Jimmy will surely be found innocent in the end. Meanwhile, Detective Bascom asks Detective Misha about the criminal investigators. She tells him they haven't found anything yet. He says they should have at least written up the results of the crime scene examination. As for Jimmy, after the nurse examines him, he cries and asks his father if he believes he is innocent. His father reassures him, saying he could never doubt his son. Afterward, the lawyer, Paul, arrives and meets Jimmy's family. He introduces himself and asks them what happened. Manda complains to him about the way the police raided the house. He tells her this happens when there's a violent murder like the one Jimmy is accused of. He informs them he will go to the detective and ask for the full details of the case. Indeed, he speaks with Detective Bascom and his colleague Misha. He confirms with them whether they explained all his rights to Jimmy. He also asks if they drew a blood sample from him. Bascom tells him they haven't taken samples yet, but they have carried out all other procedures legally, and they have nothing new to add. When Paul asks him about the time of the victim's death, Bascom tells him the death occurred at the crime scene. Later, Miller and Paul go to be with Jimmy while he is being photographed for the case file. Then, the nurse takes a saliva and blood sample from him for analysis. At this moment, we see Jimmy scared of the needle, his reaction very childish and unfitting for someone accused of murder. The officer takes his fingerprints and asks Miller for permission to have his son remove his clothes. When Miller objects, the officer tells him it's a necessary procedure for a full examination. When he informs him that criminal law permits this, he is forced to agree. When the officer finishes the search, Jimmy puts his clothes back on. He goes with his father and the lawyer, Paul, who explains that the police want to know exactly what happened, but he warns him against answering any question that could put him in a difficult position in the case. He informs him he can refuse to answer difficult questions, the ones he feels the detective is trying to trap him with. After lawyer Paul speaks with Jimmy, he leaves him and exits. Miller follows him out and tells him his son is innocent. Paul reassures him and asks him to remain calm. He tells him that if the police didn't have evidence of his son Jimmy's involvement in the crime, they wouldn't have raided the house and arrested him. He advises him to be patient until they know exactly what this evidence is. Then they can act and defend him. Because of this, Miller returns to his son Jimmy and asks him if he actually committed the crime or if he is being wrongly accused. Jimmy tells him he is wrongly accused. In the interrogation room, Miller and Paul are present with Jimmy. Before the interrogation begins, Detective Bascom informs them he will be recording audio and video. The first question the detective asks Jimmy is to explain what happened last night. Jimmy refuses to answer, saying he has no comment. Here, Detective Bascom is forced to talk about school to draw him out. He informs him that his school record is good and says he's a bright student, but at the same time, he says strange things have started appearing in his behavior. He specifically asks him about his romantic and sexual life. When Jimmy refuses to answer these questions, Detective Bascom shows him pictures of fashion models he has posted on his Instagram. He asks him their names. Jimmy denies knowing them at all, saying he just liked the picture and that's why he posted it. He shows him aggressive comments he made on one of these pictures and asks if he is attracted to women. Jimmy says he is normal and attracted to women. Then he shows him a picture of him with two of his friends. He asks him where this picture was taken. He says the place was the train station. When Detective Bascom asks their names, he says they are Tommy and Ryan, his closest friends. The detective continues his questions, asking Jimmy to tell him what he was wearing last night, but Jimmy says he doesn't remember. The detective tells him they couldn't find any of his clothes at the crime scene, but they did find one of his sneakers. He puts a picture of it in front of him and asks if he wore it last night. Jimmy gets nervous and says he doesn't remember. At this moment, Detective Misha intervenes, putting a picture of a girl named Katie in front of him. She asks if he knows her or not. He says he does indeed know her. As she continues talking about her and how close they were, Jimmy asks her if she is the one who died. Detective Bascom answers him, confirming she is indeed the one who died. When he gets emotional while speaking, lawyer Paul warns him not to push too hard, so he regains his composure. Detective Misha then asks him if their relationship developed into a sexual one. Before Jimmy speaks, his father Miller objects, reminding Misha that his son is only 13, but she insists on her question, so Jimmy answers negatively. Then she asks him if he met her yesterday, and he denies it. When she informs him that she left her house at 8:30 p.m. to meet him, he denies it a second time, telling her their relationship was merely an acquaintance, not a friendship. At this point, Detective Bascom steps in. He tells him the police found Katie's body in a parking lot at 10:30 p.m. He informs him that forensics determined the time of death was between 9:30 p.m. and 10:30 p.m. He asks him where he was at that time. Jimmy refuses to answer, as usual. Here, Detective Misha tries to provoke him. She asks if he was stalking Katie. He denies it. Bascom asks if he killed her. He denies it, saying they must have mistaken him for someone else. Bascom deliberately informs him of the number of stab wounds Katie died from, saying there were 7 stab wounds in different parts of her body. He asks if he knows the function of surveillance cameras. He shows him a picture of him with Tommy and Ryan at 7:30 p.m., telling him he decided to leave them after an hour and walk alone. A little later, he reached Katie and started watching her. When Jimmy tries to deny it, Detective Bascom corners him with the pictures, asking why he was watching Katie. But Jimmy refuses to answer, saying he didn't do anything wrong. At this moment, Detective Bascom decides to show him a video of him stabbing Katie. Jimmy is shocked and cries. His father looks at him, bewildered by what he is seeing. But Detective Bascom is unaffected and continues the interrogation, asking Jimmy how he returned home and changed his clothes without anyone noticing or suspecting him. When the interrogation ends, Jimmy continues to cry. His father breaks down too, crying beside him. He asks him what made him do it. Jimmy tells him he is innocent and didn't kill Katie. His father hugs him and tries to console him. On the third day after Katie's death, Detective Bascom goes to the school. He calls his son Adam, telling him he's outside the school. But Adam is in trouble, being bullied. His classmates are throwing their leftovers onto his plate. At the same time, Tommy and Ryan are together. When Ryan asks Tommy if he believes Jimmy really did it and killed Katie, he tells him that since the police arrested him, he must have done it. Afterward, Detective Bascom enters the school with Detective Misha. They talk to Jade, and Bascom tells her they know she was Katie's best friend. He gives her his card so she can call him anytime. She tells him his card is useless and that her friend Katie didn't deserve to die because she was the best girl she'd ever met. When Detective Bascom persists with his questions, Jade gets angry, telling him he's wasting her time and his. She reminds him that the crime was caught on video, and catching the killer should be easy, and they should do their work away from the school. At this moment, Mrs. Fenimore apologizes for Jade's behavior and takes Bascom and Misha to Katie's classroom. There, Bascom stands before them and tells them they are still looking for the murder weapon. The students ask him if they really filmed the killer and also ask if the police arrested Jimmy. At this time, Mr. Malik, the class teacher, arrives. Bascom gives him his card and asks the students to inform Mr. Malik of anything new they learn about the case, and he, in turn, will talk to him and inform him. Then, Fenimore takes them to the classroom of a teacher named Curtis. As soon as he sees them, he welcomes them and introduces them to his class. He tells them he is a police detective and also the father of their classmate Adam. A student named Fredo bullies Adam. Curtis is forced to yell at him to be quiet. He asks Bascom to speak with the students, but he doesn't get the chance because the break bell rings. During the break, Jade attacks Ryan and hits him, calling him a despicable person for killing her friend. Strangely, Ryan doesn't resist her or respond. When Bascom sees this happening, he asks Fenimore to take him to Ryan to talk to him. She tells him he will now go to the nurse's office, Carla. She takes him and Misha there. When Bascom talks to Ryan about Jimmy and asks if Jimmy spoke to him about his feelings in the past few days, Ryan says it didn't happen and he doesn't know anything. Bascom asks if he saw Jimmy's relationship with Katie as a friendship. He says they weren't friends. When he feels Bascom is pressuring him with questions, he gets scared and leaves. Before leaving the nurse's office, Bascom tells him the police still haven't found the knife used to kill Katie. But Ryan's fear increases, and he walks away quickly. Afterward, Adam asks to speak with his father, Detective Bascom. He takes him to an empty office and asks if he wants to talk about the student Fredo who bullied him in front of his classmates. But Adam tells him he came to talk about something else regarding the case. He explains the meaning of the posts and messages between Katie and Jimmy on Instagram. He explains that Katie was bullying Jimmy, constantly telling him he would remain single forever, classifying him among the incels, because he wasn't attractive and no girl would approach him. Immediately, Bascom returns to Misha and discusses what he learned from his son Adam, but the school environment seems to bother him. He tells her it feels like a prison, and the students aren't learning anything useful there. Misha goes along with him, saying the school is depressing and smells bad, and thinks about how they handle the crimes they investigate. She tells him they always talk about the perpetrator and not the victim, and newspaper headlines feature the perpetrator's name, not the victims. Bascom tells her she's mistaken, explaining they investigate the perpetrator to get justice for the victim. Suddenly, he tells her he's going back to Ryan to talk to him again because he's hiding secrets he hasn't revealed yet. Misha is forced to go after him, but as soon as he enters the classroom and asks Mr. Malik to allow him to speak with Ryan, Ryan jumps out of the classroom window and escapes. Bascom immediately runs after him and catches him. He asks him about the meaning of involuntary celibacy. that his son Adam told him about. Ryan asks him why he insists on investigating him and suggests he go talk to Tommy instead. But Bascom insists on his question and also accuses him of helping Jimmy kill Katie. He also asks if he was the one who gave him the knife. Ryan tells him the knife was indeed his, but he didn't help anyone commit murder. At this moment, Bascom informs him he is under arrest. Detective Misha arrives and informs him of his legal rights before he gets into the police car. Afterward, Bascom waits for his son Adam until the school day ends and decides to take him out for lunch to get closer to him. Meanwhile, Miller goes to place flowers at the spot where Katie was killed. 7 months later, we see a psychologist named Bryony at the training center where Jimmy is located. She wants to see the surveillance camera recordings. She watches Jimmy fighting with a peer. The facility manager asks her if she knows what she will write in Jimmy's report, mentioning that the previous psychologist visited only 3 times, not 5 like her. But Bryony isn't interested in the previous psychologist's diagnosis. Before going to see Jimmy, she brings him the hot cocoa he likes, and she has also prepared a cheese sandwich for him. Jimmy is happy with her attention. She starts talking to him about his grandparents. Jimmy tells her he sees his paternal grandparents and that his mother doesn't have a good relationship with her family. He also tells her that his grandfather and grandmother are very similar to his father in their actions and words. When she asks if his father and grandfather are misogynistic, he refuses to answer. Bryony tries to continue talking about his grandfather and father, but Jimmy tells her she's different from the last time, that she used to ask real questions, and now he feels she's deceiving him. He informs her that his father treats him well if that's what she's trying to get at, and there's no need to beat around the bush. He asks to read the report she wrote about him, telling her the lawyer said she works for his benefit. Bryony tells him he can't see the report and that she writes a report about his personality to see if he understands the charge against him and presents it to the judge. She also explains that she can't understand his personality through direct questions. She asks for his permission to continue their conversation. Jimmy agrees, although he constantly wants to provoke her and know her feelings. Bryony asks him about the fight he had, but Jimmy tells her he didn't start it and it's a trivial matter. She asks him about his feelings about being a man. Of course, Jimmy can't answer this question because it's complex and beyond his age. Bryony asks him to let her control the direction of their conversation. She tells him that if he answers her questions about his grandfather and father, she can understand his views on masculinity. She starts asking him about his father's job, whether he likes it, and also about his personal traits. Jimmy tells her his father works as a plumber and it's an exhausting job, although profitable. He also tells her his father is eccentric and sometimes gets excessively angry. He also informs her he never hit him. When Bryony asks about his feelings when he sees his father angry, he says he finds it funny. He continues talking about him, saying his father is affectionate and doesn't judge them. Bryony asks him what his father does in his free time. Jimmy tells her he loves all kinds of sports, unlike him. He tells her he used to take him to football matches, and when he made mistakes, he would ignore him. He gets very tense and sad, telling her his father didn't want to show he was ashamed of him. Bryony reacts naturally to his words and doesn't try to deny them. This annoys Jimmy, so he tells her she should tell him his father wasn't ashamed of him because no father is ashamed of his son. But Bryony tells him she didn't like sports either. He tells her she must have been good at other things and that she seems intelligent. He tells her he wasn't good at anything else and wasn't interested in finding out what he was good at, unlike his sister Lisa. Then Jimmy asks her if she met his parents. She tells him she spoke to his father and it was clear he was upset about him being here. He tells her his presence here is wrong. He asks her why they don't transfer him to a suitable prison. He tells her he hates the training center and everyone in it. She tells him this was the most suitable place for him. But he gets angry and tells her Ryan will stay at home until the trial, while he is locked up in a disgusting place like the training center. When she tells him Ryan isn't accused of committing the crime like him and asks him to sit down, Jimmy explodes at her, saying Ryan is guilty too, and she has no right to control his life and tell him when to sit and stand. He throws the hot cocoa on the floor. At that moment, security enters upon hearing Jimmy's screams, and asks Bryony if everything is okay. Suddenly, Jimmy calms down and apologizes to Bryony for raising his voice at her. When she leaves him to get herself a cup of tea, he asks her for another hot cocoa. But Bryony comes out from him feeling tense. She goes to the observation room and watches his reaction after she left him. Then she returns to him and tells him she's not a police officer and doesn't want him to confess anything to her. She asks him about his view of women. Before he answers, she remembers she forgot the hot cocoa and gets up to get it. But Jimmy asks her to sit down, telling her he doesn't deserve it and he will answer all her questions calmly. Bryony asks him about his parents' relationship. He tells her his father never hit his mother. When she asks if he has female friends or is inclined towards them, Jimmy tells her he has no female friends and wishes he had a girlfriend so they could go out together, go to the movies, and watch horror films. Bryony asks if he would try to kiss her. She also asks about the natural boundaries that might occur between a boy and girl his age. He tells her touching and kissing are appropriate for his age. He informs her he did that with 2 girls, and they liked it. When she asks if he liked it, he admits to her he's a liar and didn't do any of the things he told her. He only saw naked pictures of 2 girls from his class. Bryony asks about the girls' feelings if they knew he saw their pictures. He tells her the whole class saw them. She then asks if Katie was one of them. Jimmy gets angry and asks her how she could guess that, but she tells him it wasn't a guess, just a question. She asks if he liked Katie's picture. She also asks about his feelings when he saw the picture. Jimmy tells her Katie isn't his type of girl and he didn't feel anything when he saw her picture. He tells her Katie had sent the picture to a classmate named Fidget, and he was the one who sent it to the rest of the boys in the class. He explains that no other pictures will reach him after this. Bryony confirms his words, telling him Katie is indeed dead, but Jimmy tells her he meant no other girl will send him pictures because he didn't keep Katie's pictures safe. Bryony asks him if he sees himself as attractive to women. Jimmy tells her he is ugly and no girl will be attracted to him. When Bryony doesn't object to his words, he gets angry, yells at her, and loses his temper. Security tries to intervene, but Bryony stops them. Strangely, this annoys Jimmy even more. He asks her sarcastically if she thinks she is strong and controlling. After a while, Jimmy calms down and sits to continue their conversation. Bryony asks him about the bullying he, Ryan, and Tommy suffered. She asks him the reason he created an Instagram account. Was it to prove the bullies wrong? Or did he create it hoping one of the girls would like him and they'd get together? But Jimmy answers negatively to all these questions. She asks him about the comments Katie used to leave on his pictures. She also asks if he knows what she meant by them. He tells her she meant he was ugly and wouldn't be able to date any girl. He tells her when he confronted her, saying he could date any girl he liked, she just laughed scornfully. Bryony asks him the reason she did this to him specifically. He tells her she saw him as the ugliest boy in school. He continues, saying he didn't kill Katie even though she was despicable. He only asked her out after her pictures circulated and everyone started treating her badly. He thought she would agree because she was vulnerable, but she refused, telling him she wasn't that desperate. He tells her this is the reason for his attack on her. He keeps insisting to Bryony that he didn't kill her. He could have done it, but he controlled himself. He says he considers himself better than all other men. After he finishes speaking, Bryony informs him this is the last time he will see her. Jimmy gets upset and refuses, telling her he hasn't finished talking to her. He asks if she is attracted to him. He tells her he is attracted to her and wants to know her opinion of him. When she refuses to answer, he keeps screaming, and security intervenes, taking him away from her. Jimmy warns her not to tell the judge that he killed Katie. He asks her to tell his father he is okay. After Jimmy leaves, Bryony breaks down and cries due to the pressure he caused her. The next morning, Miller is surprised to find offensive phrases about him and his son Jimmy written on his car. When his daughter Lisa sees it, she gets upset, and her father tells her it's not her fault. He goes inside to prepare water and soap to wipe off the offensive phrases. When he returns home, Manda tries to convince him to move their residence to Liverpool, promising her mother will get him a job there, but he refuses, telling her they did nothing wrong and aren't to blame for any of this. He gets annoyed when he tries to wash the writing off the car and it doesn't come off. He gets even more annoyed when two young men pass by him and accuse him of being a pervert like his son. Miller shouts at them, asking if they were the ones who wrote on his car, but they ignore him and continue on their way. Afterward, Miller decides to take his wife Manda and daughter Lisa to a nearby store to look for a substance to remove the paint. When they ask why he's taking them with him, he tells them he can't leave them home alone because the whole family is now at risk after Jimmy's case. On the way, Manda reminds her husband Miller of their youth and the beginning of their relationship. He plays along, talking about how their love began. Their daughter Lisa gets embarrassed and asks them to be quiet. When they arrive at the store, Miller asks one of the employees about a substance that can remove the paint on his car. The employee takes him to his colleague Quint, who knows more about paints and how to remove them. When Quint learns what happened to the car, he tells him he could use alcohol and try washing the car again, but it would be better for him to repaint the car. He takes him to the section with paints and gives him a new bucket of paint to paint his car with. At that time, he tells him he recognized him as soon as he saw him because his pictures are all over social media. He tells him he's on his side and his son's side and advises him to hire a good lawyer for his son. But Miller doesn't want to talk to him, so he takes the paint to pay for it and leave. But when he goes outside, he sees the two boys who were riding bikes and calling him a pervert. He goes and grabs one of them and hits him, telling him to stay away from him and his family. Then he sprays the paint on his car angrily, covering only a small part of the written phrase. When a large amount of paint spills on the ground, the store security asks him to clean up the mess he left behind. He insults him, takes his daughter and wife, and they get in the car to return home. On the way, Jimmy calls his father and tells him he wants to confess what he did. He tells him that as the trial gets closer, he feels he must tell the truth. Suddenly, Manda speaks, and Jimmy gets embarrassed. He tells her he thought he was talking to his father. Before ending the call, he promises to call them at the end of the week as they usually do. When they arrive home, Miller is upset by his son Jimmy's words. His wife Manda follows him and tells him Jimmy's confession will be in his best interest, so he shouldn't be upset. She starts telling him about Jimmy's habits before the case he got involved in. She tells him she used to see his room light on until 1 in the morning. When she knocked on his door and reminded him he had school early, he would turn off the light but stay awake. Miller tells her all kids are like that these days, and no one can know exactly what they're watching because violent and pornographic materials are horribly widespread. He explains to her that this generation is out of control now. When Manda tells him they should have stopped him when they suspected he was doing something wrong, Miller replies that his father used to do that with him, but he used to hit him to prevent him from doing wrong. He promised himself never to do that with his children because he wanted to be better than his father. He reminds her that he used to take Jimmy to play football, but he wasn't good at it, so his teammates made him goalkeeper. After that, he took him to boxing, but he didn't want to continue with it. He left it and turned to drawing. Then he asked him for a computer, so he bought it for him right away. Miller starts blaming himself because he spent too much time at work and didn't fulfill his role as a father. He tells Manda she was a good mother, and he was a failed father. She is moved by his words and tells him he was a good father too, and what Jimmy did was unexpected, and they are not to blame. Then their daughter Lisa enters and reminds her father that today is his birthday. She asks him to be happy, even for a few minutes, and forget what happened, but he doesn't forget. He enters his son Jimmy's room and cries alone, blaming himself for the crime his son committed. The series ends.